They took everything from him, his honor, his family, his very name. But they could not take his rage. In the blood-soaked sand of the arena, a broken general would rise as something far more dangerous, a ghost seeking vengeance. This is his story. The Rhine frontier stretched before him like a serpent of silver, cutting through the Germanic forest with ancient indifference. General Maximus Decimus Meridius sat astride his horse, watching his breath crystallize in the bitter air. Behind him, 20,000 Roman legionaries waited in disciplined silence, their armor catching the weak winter sun like scales on some great metal beast. He was 42 years old. His face bore the map of 100 campaigns, scars that spoke of Persian arrows, Egyptian blades, and Germanic axes. But his eyes, those dark pools that had witnessed so much death, still held something unexpected: kindness. It was this paradox that made men follow him into the very mouth of hell. General, came the voice of Quintus, his second in command. The barbarians refused the emperor's terms. Maximus nodded slowly, as if he had expected nothing less. He had learned long ago that war was inevitable when proud men were given ultimatums. The Germanic tribes would not surrender their freedom without blood. Neither would he, were their positions reversed. "Then we fight," he said quietly. "But, Quintus, remember, these are not our true enemies. Poverty, fear, desperation. These are the generals that command them. We face only their soldiers." Quintus looked at him with a mixture of admiration and confusion that Maximus often inspired. How could a man so brilliant in the art of killing hold such compassion for those he must destroy? The battle that followed was brief and terrible. Maximus had planned it for weeks, studying the terrain, understanding the enemy's desperation. The Germanic warriors fought like trapped wolves, but Roman discipline was an iron vice. By sunset, the frontier was secured. The Rhine ran red, and the screams of the dying echoed through the ancient trees. Maximus walked among the wounded, both Roman and Germanic, his face a mask of controlled sorrow. He knelt beside a young barbarian warrior, no more than 16, whose life was leaking out through a wound in his side. The boy's eyes were wide with terror and pain. "Sho!" Maximus whispered in the boy's own language, learned during years on the frontier. "Your gods wait for you. You fought with honor." The boy died with his hand in Maximus's, and the general stayed there, kneeling in the blood-soaked mud, until his men came to collect the bodies. Some of his officers looked away, uncomfortable with this display of humanity in their commander. Others understood it was precisely this humanity that made Maximus the greatest general Rome had ever known. That night, Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, arrived at the command tent. The old emperor moved slowly, his body failing him even as his mind remained sharp as Damascus steel. He was 72, and death shadowed his every step. "Walk with me, Maximus," the emperor said, and it was a request, not a command. They moved through the camp, past fires where soldiers sang victory songs and tended wounds, past the carts of the dead waiting for their funeral pyres. "You're troubled," Marcus Aurelius observed. "Another victory," Maximus replied. "Another field of corpses. Another step toward the peace you envision, paved with the bodies of men who wanted only to protect their homes." The emperor smiled sadly. "You see the cost of empire." "I see the cost of everything, Caesar. I've been at war since I was 20. I've killed more men than I can count. I brought entire peoples under Roman dominion. And for what? So that Rome can extend its reach a few more miles? So that senators can grow fat on the tribute of conquered lands?" "No," Marcus Aurelius said firmly, stopping to face him. "For an idea, Maximus. For the dream that one day all peoples might live under a government of law, not tyranny. That justice might replace the sword. That reason might triumph over fear." "A beautiful dream," Maximus said quietly. "But Caesar, I'm tired. I dream of my home in Spain, my wife, my son. I dream of soil under my fingernails instead of blood. I dream of planting instead of destroying." The emperor's eyes gleamed with something Maximus couldn't quite read. "Then you shall have it. The campaign is over. The frontier is secure. You've earned your rest. Thank you, Caesar. But first..." Marcus Aurelius continued, his voice taking on a weight that made Maximus's heart grow cold. "I must ask one more service of you, the greatest service any man can give." And there, under the stars of Germania, Marcus Aurelius spoke words that would destroy Maximus's world. "My son Commodus is not fit to rule. You know this. Rome knows this. He is vain, cruel, weak in the ways that matter, and strong only in his appetites. If he becomes emperor, he will undo everything we've built. The Senate is corrupt. The guards are loyal only to gold. But you, Maximus, the army loves you. The people love you. Rome loves you." Maximus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "Caesar, what are you saying? I want you to be the protector of Rome. When I die, and I will die soon, I feel it, I want you to hold power temporarily, not as emperor, but as the guardian of the Republic. Give Rome back to the Senate and the people. Restore the Republic that we lost a century ago. And then, Maximus, then you can go home." "This is madness," Maximus whispered. "Commodus is your son, your blood. He is my greatest regret," Marcus Aurelius said, and the pain in his voice was like a physical thing. "I gave him everything except what he needed: discipline, purpose, suffering. I made him a prince when I should have made him a man. Now Rome will suffer for my failure as a father unless you help me correct it." Maximus stood in silence, feeling the weight of empire settling on his shoulders like chains. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to run to his villa in Spain, to hold his wife Celine and his son Marcus, and never let go. But he was a soldier. He had always been a soldier, and soldiers did their duty. "I will do as you command, Caesar," he said finally, "but I ask you to reconsider. The succession is already decided." The emperor interrupted. "I will announce it tomorrow. You need not worry about Commodus. I will handle my son." But Marcus Aurelius would never get that chance. Commodus arrived the next morning like a thunderstorm, all violence and unpredictability wrapped in a toga. He was 31, beautiful in the way a snake is beautiful, with dark eyes that held no light. He embraced his father with all the warmth of a politician greeting a crowd, and Marcus Aurelius seemed to diminish in his presence. Maximus watched from a distance, and dread filled his heart like cold water. That evening, father and son spoke privately. The camp grew quiet as men settled for sleep, exhausted from battle and victory celebrations. Maximus tried to rest but couldn't. His mind kept returning to his home. Celine's laugh, young Marcus chasing butterflies to the wheat fields, the smell of bread baking in the clay oven, the scream that shattered the night was barely human. Maximus ran toward the emperor's tent, his heart hammering. He burst through the entrance to find Marcus Aurelius on his bed, his face a mass of agony and sorrow. Commodus stood over him, his hand still extended, his face wet with tears. "Father!" Commodus wailed. "No, father, please. I didn't mean..." But Maximus saw. He saw the bruising on the old emperor's throat. He saw the guilt and triumph warring on Commodus's face. He saw the moment Commodus registered his presence and the calculation that flickered across his eyes. "Maximus," Commodus said, his voice breaking. "My father, he's had a seizure. Help him. Please, help him." Maximus moved to the bed, but he already knew. Marcus Aurelius, philosopher emperor, was dead, murdered by his own son. The emperor's fingers were curled, as if he had tried to fight off his attacker. His eyes were open, staring at something Maximus couldn't see. Perhaps the republic he had dreamed of restoring. Perhaps the son he had failed to save from himself. "Leave us," Maximus said coldly to Commodus. "He's my father. Leave. Now." Commodus departed, but Maximus saw the look the younger man gave him. It was the look of a predator marking prey. In the terrible silence that followed, Maximus gently closed the emperor's eyes and whispered prayer to the gods he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Then he stayed there, keeping vigil over the body of the man who had been both his commander and, in some ways, the father he'd lost as a child. By dawn, the camp knew Marcus Aurelius was dead. Commodus was emperor, and the world had changed forever. Commodus moved quickly. Within hours, he had the Praetorian guards in his pocket. Gold had a way of securing loyalty that honor never could. He announced his father's death, declared a period of mourning, and then, with the bodies barely cold, began consolidating power. He summoned Maximus to the command tent at noon. The new emperor sat in his father's chair like it was a throne, his fingers drumming on the armrest. Around him stood members of Praetorian Guard, their faces hard and watchful. General Maximus, Commodus said, his voice dripping with false warmth. My most loyal subject. Maximus said nothing. He stood at attention, every muscle tense. My father held you in high regard, Commodus continued. Perhaps too high regard. Tell me, General, what did my father discuss with you last night? Military matters, Caesar. Military matters. Commodus smiled, but it was the smile of a shark. Did he discuss the succession? He mourned that he would not see Rome at peace. Did he discuss me? Maximus met his eyes. You are emperor now. Nothing else matters. How diplomatic, Commodus said, rising from his chair. He circled Maximus like a vulture circling carrion. My father dreamed of restoring the Republic. Did you know that? He wanted to give Rome back to the Senate, as if those corrupt old men could govern better than a single strong hand. Tell me, Maximus, do you share his dream? I share his desire for peace. That's not what I asked. Commodus stopped directly in front of him. I asked if you dream of a republic. I asked if you think Rome needs you more than it needs me. Rome needs stability. Rome needs to be reminded who commands it. Commodus shouted, his composure cracking. My father spent his whole life trying to teach the world to think, to reason, to philosophy. And what did it gain him? A cold camp in Germania, and a son he despised. Well, I am not my father. I will not be gentle. I will not be weak. He turned away, then spoke quietly, dangerously. You will pledge your loyalty to me, Maximus, publicly, before the legions. You will tell them that the son is worthy of the father's throne. I cannot do that. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Commodus spun around, his face flushed with rage. What did you say? I cannot pledge false loyalty, Maximus said steadily. I serve Rome. I serve the dream of... The dream is dead. Commodus screamed. My father is dead. His republic is dead. There's only empire now, and I am empire. Then you must leave without me, Caesar. I respectfully request permission to return to my home. Commodus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, Maximus, my dear, honorable Maximus, do you really think I can let you go? You, whom the legions worship. You, whom my father wanted to make his successor. Do you think I'm fool enough to release a blade that might be turned against me? I want no power. But power wants you. Commodus moved close, his breath hot on Maximus's face. Every man in this camp would follow you to the gates of hell. The Senate respects you. The people love you. You are the only threat to my throne, and I will not sleep soundly while you live. Maximus felt the cold clarity of understanding. This was not a conversation. It was a prelude to execution. If you kill me, he said quietly, the legions will rebel. If I kill you directly, yes, Commodus agreed. But if you die trying to escape arrest for treason, if evidence is found of a plot against the emperor, well, then you're just another traitor, and Rome is well rid of you. I have committed no treason. Treason is what I say it is. Commodus said simply, Guards, arrest this man. Take him to the east camp, and keep him under watch until I decide his fate. And send riders. I want his family found and brought to Rome. A man fights harder when he has something to lose. The mention of his family made Maximus's blood run cold. My wife and son have nothing to do with this. They're innocent. There are no innocents in politics, Commodus said. Only winners and losers. Take him away. The Praetorian guards moved forward, and Maximus didn't resist. Not yet. Not while they held his family over him like a sword. He allowed himself to be bound, allowed himself to be led from the tent like a common criminal. But as they walked through the camp, he saw his men watching. He saw Quintus, his friend, his second, torn between loyalty and duty. He saw the confusion and anger on the faces of soldiers who had followed him through a dozen campaigns, and he knew that if he died here, if Commodus executed him, these men would have died for nothing. The frontier would have been secured for nothing. All the blood, all the sacrifice, would be swallowed up by the vanity and cruelty of a tyrant. He couldn't let that happen. That night, as the camp slept and his guards grew complacent, Maximus made his move. The ropes that bound him had been tied by men who respected him, and they had left just enough slack. He worked his wrists bloody getting free, moving with the patience of a man who had nothing but time and everything to lose. When he finally slipped the bonds, he moved like smoke through the tent. One guard died without a sound, Maximus's hand over his mouth as the knife found his heart. The second guard turned, opened his mouth to shout, and Maximus broke his neck with his bare hands. He felt nothing, no remorse, no triumph, only the cold necessity of survival. He stole a horse and rode west toward Spain, toward home. Behind him, the alarm was raised. Torches lit the night. Horns blared. The hunt had begun. But Maximus had a head start, and he knew these lands. He rode through forests and across rivers, changing horses when he could, stealing food when he must. Every mile brought him closer to his family, to safety, to the dream of peace that had kept him alive through so many years of war. He rode for 4 days and nights, pushing himself and his horses beyond endurance. In his mind, he rehearsed a reunion. Celine's tears of joy, young Marcus's laughter, the feel of home soil beneath his feet. He would gather them quickly, he planned. They would flee to the coast, take ship to Africa or Greece, disappear into the empire's vastness. Commodus was emperor, but even emperors could not watch every shadow. On the 5th day, he crested the hill that overlooked his villa, and his world ended. The villa was burning. Even from a distance, he could see the smoke rising black against the afternoon sky, could smell the acrid stench of destruction. His horse, exhausted beyond measure, stumbled down the hillside while Maximus kicked its flanks, screaming, begging it to move faster. Praetorian guards were still there, standing among the olive trees he had planted, wiping blood from their swords. They had arrived the day before him. Commodus's riders had been faster. Maximus dismounted while his horse was still moving, stumbling, running toward the smoking ruins of everything he loved. The guard saw him, shouted, drew weapons. He didn't care. He was beyond caring. He found her in the garden. Celine lay among her roses, her body broken, her hands reaching towards something Maximus couldn't see. Her eyes were open, staring at the sky, and there was such an expression of sorrow on her face that Maximus felt something inside him shatter into pieces too small to ever reassemble. He fell to his knees beside her, pulling her body into his arms, and the sound that came from his throat was not quite human. It was a sound of the soul tearing in half, of love transforming into something darker and more terrible than hate. "Celine!" he whispered, rocking her. "Celine, I'm here. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." But she was beyond hearing, beyond everything. He found Marcus near the olive press, his son, his beautiful boy, 8 years old, with Celine's eyes and his own stubborn chin. The child who had once asked him why men had to fight, whether war would ever end, whether fathers always came home. Marcus had not been given a warrior's death. He had been crucified, nailed to the olive like a common slave, like a message written in blood and pain. His small hands were torn where the nails had pierced them. His face was frozen in an expression of terror and confusion. Maximus cut him down with trembling hands. He laid his son beside his wife in the ash and ruin of their home. And then he did something he had not done since he was a boy. He wept. He wept as the Praetorian guards approached, their weapons drawn. He wept as they surrounded him, as their commander, a man named Quintus, his former friend, who would not meet his eyes, ordered him to surrender. "Kill me," Maximus said. His voice was hollow, empty of everything but the void where his heart had been. "Kill me now. Let me join them." "Our orders are to bring you to Rome," Quintus said quietly, "to face trial for treason." "Treason?" Maximus laughed, and it was a terrible sound. "Yes, I'm guilty. Guilty of believing there was honor in Rome." Guilty of thinking service mattered. Guilty of leaving my family undefended while I fought for an empire that devours its children. Kill me. Please, Quintus. You were my friend once. Give me that mercy. But Quintus shook his head. I'm sorry, Maximus. I have my orders. They bound him again, this time with chains, not ropes. They threw him into a cart like cargo. And as they rode away from the burning villa, Maximus looked back one last time at the bodies of his wife and son, lying together in the garden where they had once been happy. The guards had not even given them a burial. Something crystallized inside Maximus, then something cold and sharp and utterly merciless. The man who had knelt in the mud beside dying enemies, who had wept for the cost of victory, who had dreamed of peace. That man died in the ashes of his home. What rose in his place was something simpler, something terrible. Vengeance. The journey to Rome should have taken 3 weeks. It took less than 2. Commodus was eager for his prize. The spectacle of Rome's greatest general brought low. The new emperor had already announced Maximus's treason, had told the Senate and the people that their beloved general had plotted to kill him and seize the throne. The mob, fickle as always, had believed him. Maximus the hero had become Maximus the traitor in the span of a proclamation. They crossed into Italy, and Maximus said nothing. He ate the scraps they threw him, drank when they offered water, and stared at the sky with eyes that saw nothing but ash and blood. The guards muttered that he had gone mad, that grief had broken his mind. They were almost right, but not quite. On the 10th day of travel, as they passed through a dense forest north of Rome, bandits attacked the convoy. It was a desperate, stupid attack, perhaps a dozen men against 20 Praetorian guards. It should have been a slaughter, but the bandits had surprise, and they had hunger, and in the chaos of the ambush, one of them broke open Maximus's cage. "Run!" The bandits shouted in gutter Latin. "We hold them." Maximus looked at the man, rail-thin, desperate, dying even as he spoke from a spear wound in his side. A criminal, probably a murderer, thief, rapist. The kind of man Maximus had once sworn to protect Rome from. "Why?" Maximus asked. The bandit grinned through bloody teeth. "Enemy of Rome's enemy is friend." Then he died and Maximus ran. He ran into the forest. Chain still on his wrists, and behind him, he heard Quintus shouting orders, heard the clash of steel on steel. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs trembled, until he collapsed in a dry streambed miles from the road. He lay there in the dirt, gasping, bleeding from a dozen cuts he didn't remember receiving. Above him, the stars were coming out, cold and distant, the same stars that had shone on his villa, the same stars Selene and Marcus would never see again. "I will kill him," Maximus whispered to those stars. "I swear it, by all the gods above and below, I will kill Commodus. I will make him feel what I feel. I will make him understand loss." The stars, indifferent as always, made no answer. He was found the next morning by slavers. Proximo's slavers dragged him from the stream bed like a netted fish. Maximus tried to fight, but he was weak from hunger and grief, and they were many. They beat him until he couldn't stand, then threw him into a wagon with a dozen other wretches. Men and women bound for the slave markets of North Africa. For 3 days, they traveled south to the coast. Maximus drifted in and out of consciousness, his body failing even as his mind clung to the single thought that kept him breathing: vengeance. On the 4th day, he woke to the sound of the sea and the smell of salt and human misery. They were at Ostia, Rome's port, where ships departed for every corner of the empire. The slavers herded their cargo onto a creaking vessel that stank of death and desperation. In the hold, chained to a post, Maximus found himself next to a young man, barely more than a boy, who wept quietly in the darkness. "First time?" Maximus asked. His voice cracked and harsh. The boy jumped, startled to hear Latin among the moans and foreign tongues. "Yes, I was a baker's apprentice. There was a fire. They said I said it. I didn't. I swear I didn't." "Doesn't matter," Maximus said. "You're a slave now. Guilt and innocence are luxuries for free men." "How long have you been enslaved?" "4 days. A lifetime. What's the difference?" The boys stare at him with the same expression Maximus had seen on young Marcus's face when he'd asked about war, as if adults held answers that could make sense of senseless things. "What's your name?" the boy asked finally. Maximus almost said it, almost claimed his identity, his history, his right to be remembered as Rome's greatest general. But that man was dead. That man had died in a garden in Spain. "Nobody," he said. "I'm nobody." They sailed for 2 weeks, and each day was agony. The hold was cramped, foul, airless. Men died in their chains and were thrown overboard with casual indifference. The boy, whose name was Tomas, grew sick with fever. Maximus gave him his water ration and held him when the nightmares came. "Why are you kind to me?" Tomas asked one night. "You're so hard, so angry. I can feel it coming off you like heat from a forge. But you help me." "Because someone should have been kind to my son," Maximus said quietly. "And no one was." Tomas lived. Others didn't. By the time they reached the port of Tingis on the African coast, half the slaves in the hold were dead. From Tingis, they were marched inland to Zuccobar, a dusty, brutal town at the edge of the empire's North African territories. Here, the slavers sold their cargo to the highest bidders. Farmers bought workers for their fields. Mine owners bought men whose lives would be measured in months of brutal labor. Brothel keepers bought women and children whose fates Maximus tried not to think about. And Proximo bought gladiators. He was an old man, Proximo, perhaps 60, with scars that mapped a lifetime in the arena. He had been a gladiator once, had even fought in the Colosseum itself, had won his freedom through blood and skill and theatrical flair. Now he ran a ludus, a gladiator school, and he walked among the slaves with the calculating eye of a man shopping for livestock. He stopped in front of Maximus, studying him with interest. "This one," he said to the slaver. "What's his history?" The slaver shrugged. "Captured during a Praetorian convoy. Was being taken to Rome for trial." "Trial for what?" "Didn't ask. Doesn't matter. He's strong. Good bones. See how he holds himself? He's a fighter." Proximo circled Maximus slowly. "Look at me," he commanded. Maximus raised his eyes, and for a moment, the two men stared at each other. Proximo flinched, just slightly. "Those are killer's eyes," he murmured. "I've seen many men, many slaves. But you're different. What's your name?" "Nobody." "I'll call you Spaniard," Proximo decided. "You have that look about you, that proud Iberian stubbornness." He turned to the slaver. "I'll take him. And that boy there." "The boy?" The slaver laughed. "He's dying. Waste a coin." "Exactly. So you'll give him to me for free, won't you?" The transaction was completed. Maximus and Tomas were unchained from the slave line and rechained to Proximo's wagon. As they were led away, Maximus looked back at the other slaves, at the men and women and children being sold to fates worse than death, and felt nothing. He had no compassion left to give. It had all burned with his family. Proximo's ludus was a compound of training yards, cells, and an arena where local crowds came to watch men die for entertainment. There were perhaps 30 gladiators there, men from every corner of the empire, Gauls and Germans, Thracians and Egyptians, criminals and prisoners of war, and slaves who had been born in chains. Hagen was the first to speak to him, a giant Germanic warrior with a braided beard and eyes like winter ice. He looked at Maximus with a frank assessment of a man evaluating a potential threat or ally. "Spaniard," he said in heavily accented Latin. "You have soldiers bearing. Where did you serve?" "Does it matter?" "In here, nothing matters but survival," Hagen replied. "But knowing who stands beside you helps. I was of the Marcomanni. We fought Rome at the Danube." "I know," Maximus said. "I was there." Hagen's eyes widened slightly. "Which side?" "The winning side." "Ah." Hagen nodded slowly. "So, we were enemies once. Perhaps we will be again, when Proximo puts us in the arena. Or perhaps we will fight together. Either way, know this. I respect an honest warrior, even a Roman one." Over the following weeks, Maximus learned the brutal hierarchy of the ludus. Proximo was master, absolute in his authority. Beneath him was Cassius, the trainer, a former gladiator himself, cruel and efficient. And beneath them were the gladiators, divided by skill and experience into the veterans who commanded respect and the novices who were simply meat for the arena. Maximus was trained with the novices, expected to die in his first fight. He had other plans. The training was savage. Every morning before dawn, they were roused with whips and driven into the practice yard. They learned to fight with gladius and trident, net and shield, spear and bare hands. They learned to move on sand, to anticipate attacks, to make their deaths entertaining. Cassius focused particularly on Maximus, sensing something in him that demanded either breaking or killing. "You!" he shouted one morning, pointing a stick at Maximus. Spaniard stepped forward. Maximus obeyed, moving into the center of the practice circle. "You hold your sword wrong," Cassius sneered. "You fight like a soldier, not a gladiator. In the arena, that will get you killed. A gladiator fights for the crowd. A gladiator performs. A gladiator dies." Maximus interrupted, like everyone else. Cassius's face purpled. "You dare speak back to me? I speak truth. You train us to be entertainers while we're murdered for sport. Call it what it is." The practice yard fell silent. Hagen watched with interest. Tomas, who had been recovering under Maximus's protection, looked terrified. Cassius smiled coldly. "Very well, since you think you know better than me. Let's see what you can do. Hagen, kill this fool." The Germanic warrior sighed, but took up his practice sword. He approached Maximus with the wary respect of a man who recognized danger. "I do not wish to hurt you, Spaniard," he said quietly, "but I will if I must." "Then do it," Maximus replied. They fought. What happened next became legend in Proximos Ludus. Maximus moved like death itself, economical, brutal, unstoppable. He had forgotten more about combat than Cassius had ever known, had commanded armies while the trainer was learning to clean his blade. Every technique Hagen used, Maximus countered. Every feint, every strike, every desperate attempt to overpower him. Maximus turned aside with the casual competence of a master. Within 2 minutes, Hagen was on his back, Maximus's wooden sword at his throat. The practice yard erupted. Men cheered, cursed, shouted in languages Maximus didn't understand. Cassius stood frozen, his authority shattered. And Proximo, who had been watching from his balcony, began to laugh. "Bring him to me," the old man called. "Bring me the Spaniard." In Proximo's office, a cluttered room filled with trophies, weapons, and the memorabilia of a gladiator's life. Maximus stood in silence while the old man studied him. "You're no ordinary slave," Proximo said finally. "I've seen soldiers. I've seen warriors. But you're something else. Who were you? Before?" "Nobody. Liar." Proximo leaned forward. "You move like a general today, like a man who's commanded thousands. I ask again, who are you?" "A dead man." "We're all dead men here, Spaniard. The question is how we die. And you have the look of a man who wants to take someone with him." Proximo smiled. "Good. I can use that. Rage makes gladiators great. And you, I think, have rage enough to burn down Rome itself." He wasn't wrong. The arena of Zuccobar was small compared to the great amphitheaters of Rome, but it was no less deadly. 3,000 spectators could pack its stone benches to watch men kill each other in the afternoon sun. It was here that Proximo tested his gladiators, winnowing the weak from the strong, the entertaining from forgettable. Maximus's first fight was meant to be his last. They sent him out with 6 other novices against a team of veteran gladiators, 3 men armed with trident and net, who had survived dozens of bouts. It was meant to be a massacre, a brief entertainment before the main events. But Maximus had other plans. "Stay behind me," he commanded the other novices as they entered the arena. "Form a line. Shields up. When I move, you follow." "You can't command us," one of them spat. "We're not soldiers." "Then die alone," Maximus said flatly. "Or follow my orders and maybe live. Choose quickly." The roar of the crowd drowned out further debate. The veterans approached, moving with the casual confidence of men who had done this many times before. The crowd called for blood, stamping their feet, chanting. Maximus waited as the veterans circled, looking for the weakest target. waited as they began their attack, trident stabbing forward, net spinning through the air. Then he moved. What the crowd saw was devastation. Maximus didn't fight like a gladiator. He fought like a general reducing an enemy formation. He identified the leader, cut him down in 3 strokes. He turned the other's advantage of experience against them, forcing them to fight where the crowd couldn't see their skill. He used the novices like pieces on a game board, positioning them to block, to distract, to survive. Within 5 minutes, the veterans were dead. The novices stood in shock, covered in blood that wasn't theirs. And the crowd went absolutely mad with joy. "Spaniard," they chanted. "Spaniard, Spaniard." Maximus stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, only the hollow ache where his heart had been, and the burning ember of his purpose. He had survived. That was enough. For now, after that day, everything changed. Proximo began to see not just a gladiator in Maximus, but an investment, a champion. The Spaniard fought 15 times in the arena of Zuccobar, and 15 times he emerged victorious. He killed when he had to, showed mercy when the crowd demanded it, and slowly, grudgingly, earned the respect of every man in the ludus. Hagen became his closest ally, the 2 former enemies finding common ground in their shared captivity. The Germanic warrior had a wife and children somewhere beyond the Rhine, taken or killed when the Romans came. His rage was colder than Maximus's, more controlled, but no less real. "You fight to die," Hagen observed one night as they sat together after training. "Every battle, I watch you. You seek death, but death will not take you." "Then death is a coward," Maximus replied. "No, death waits. Death knows your work to finish." Hagen took a long drink of water. "You want revenge. I see it. We all see it. Against who? The Emperor." Hagen laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "The Emperor of Rome? You aim high, Spaniard." "I was high once," Maximus said quietly. "I commanded legions. I fought beside Marcus Aurelius. I could have been..." He stopped, realizing he had said too much. But Hagen only nodded slowly. "I knew you were no ordinary soldier. The way you command, even here, even in chains, men follow you without thinking. It is a gift the gods give to few." He leaned closer. "If you truly seek the Emperor's death, you must survive. You must become great enough that they take you to Rome, to the Colosseum itself. Only there, in the heart of empire, can you reach him." "And you?" Maximus asked. "Why do you fight?" "Because I must. Because my children may yet live, and slaves can sometimes buy their freedom. Because rage alone is not enough to sustain a man. He must have hope, however small." Hagen smiled grimly. "But I will help you, Spaniard. Your enemy killed your family. Mine enslaved yours. Perhaps together, we can make Rome understand the cost of empire." As the months passed, word of the Spaniards spread beyond Zuccobar. Merchants and travelers brought tales of the gladiator who fought like a demon, who never lost, who made the arena sing with blood and glory. Proximo began to receive offers from larger cities. Carthage, Alexandria, even Rome itself. "You're making me rich, Spaniard," the old man said one evening. "Rich enough to retire, perhaps, but I'm a greedy old bastard. I want more. I want to take you to the grandest stage of all. Rome," Maximus said, "the Colosseum, where 50,000 Romans will scream your name, where the emperor himself watches from his box." Proximo studied him carefully. "That's what you want, isn't it? To get close to Commodus." "I don't know what you mean." "Liar, I've watched you for months now. You don't fight for survival. You don't fight for freedom. You fight with purpose, and that purpose leads only one direction." Proximo leaned back in his chair. "I was a gladiator once. Did you know that? I fought in the Colosseum under Marcus Aurelius himself. The old emperor, the philosopher, the dreamer. He gave me my freedom after I saved a senator's son in the arena. He gave me the wooden sword, the rudis, and told me I had earned my dignity back. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I understand what it means to have everything taken from you, and have to earn it back drop by drop in blood and pain. Because I see in you something I once saw in myself, a man who refuses to die before his time. Because Proximo paused, choosing his words carefully. Because Rome needs to remember that emperors are mortal too. Their eyes met, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. Proximo would get his fortune, Maximus would get his revenge, and Rome would get the spectacle it craved. "We leave for Rome in 3 weeks," Proximo announced. "I've secured a spot in the games celebrating the Emperor's birthday. 100 days of entertainment. The grandest games in a generation. Every gladiator from every corner of the Empire will be there. And we, my Spaniard, will make them remember what it means to be truly great." The journey to Rome was a procession of chains and carts, gladiators and animals, the whole grotesque carnival of death that fed the Empire's appetite for blood. Maximus traveled with Hagen, Tomas, who had learned to fight and earned his place among them, and a dozen other survivors of Proximo's school. As they crossed into Italy, as the hills of his homeland appeared on the horizon, Maximus felt the old wound tear open fresh. Somewhere south, his villa stood empty, or perhaps occupied by new owners who knew nothing of the ghost that walked its gardens. Somewhere in that fertile soil, his wife and son lay in unmarked graves, their deaths unavenged. Not for long. Rome appeared on the 7th day of their approach. The eternal city, sprawling across its 7 hills, the center of the world, the beating heart of empire. Its walls were massive, its aqueducts magnificent, its wealth and power palpable even from a distance. Maximus had visited Rome many times as a general, had walked its streets as a hero, had been honored in the Senate. Now he returned as property. They were housed in the Ludus Magnus, the great gladiatorial school adjacent to the Colosseum itself. Here, hundreds of gladiators prepared for death. The facility was enormous. Training yards, armories, barracks, even a small arena for practice bouts. And through the walls, they could hear the roar of the Colosseum, that massive amphitheater where emperors and mob together decided who lived and who died. "Tomorrow, they will evaluate you," Proximo explained to his gladiators that first night. "You will fight in small exhibitions, so the game's master can rank you, can decide which bouts will be most entertaining. Fight well, but not too well. Save your best for when it matters." But Maximus had no interest in holding back. Every fight brought him closer to his goal. Every victory elevated his status, made him more valuable, more visible, more likely to catch the Emperor's attention. The exhibition fights were brutal. Maximus was matched against a Numidian warrior named Hanno, a man who had killed 30 opponents in the arena. They fought with real weapons but blunted edges, dangerous enough to injure, not quite sharp enough to kill easily. Hanno was fast, skilled, powerful. He had every advantage except one. Maximus had nothing to lose. The fight lasted less than a minute. Maximus disarmed Hanno, broke his sword arm, and held his blade to the man's throat, while the game's master watched with barely concealed excitement. "Mercy or death?" the master called. Maximus looked down at Hanno, saw the fear in his eyes, saw a man who, like himself, had been given no choice in his fate. He lowered his blade. He fought with honor, Maximus said. "Let him live." The crowd of officials and sponsors watching the exhibition murmured with approval. Mercy was sometimes more entertaining than death, and a gladiator who understood this was valuable indeed. After the exhibitions, the rankings were posted. Maximus, listed only as Spaniard Ludus Proximo, was placed in the first tier. He would fight in the main events, before the largest crowds, in bouts that would be remembered. "You're famous now," Hagen told him that night. "The whole city talks about the Spanish gladiator, who fights like Mars himself." "Good," Maximus said. "Let them talk. Let the Emperor hear." "Be careful what you wish for," Proximo warned. "Once Commodus notices you, everything changes. He is not like his father. Marcus Aurelius loved the games of the tradition, their connection to Rome's warrior past. But Commodus loves them for the blood, for the power. He has even fought in the arena himself. Did you know that? Dressed as Hercules, killing crippled animals and helpless men, declaring himself a god." "He's no god," Maximus said coldly. "He bleeds like any man. I've seen it. When? Proximo asked sharply. Maximus realized his mistake, but decided the truth might as well be known. I knew him before. I served under his father. The room fell silent. Hagen, Tomas Proximo, all stared at it with new understanding. Who are you? Proximo whispered. Truly? A dead man, Maximus repeated. Nothing more. But that night, as Maximus lay on his hard bunk staring at the ceiling, he allowed himself to remember Marcus Aurelius's wisdom, his kindness, his dream of a better Rome, to remember Celine's laugh, the way she sang while preparing meals, the softness of her hand in his, to remember young Marcus chasing butterflies, asking endless questions about the world, believing his father could fix anything. He had failed them all, failed the emperor who trusted him, failed the family who loved him, failed Rome itself. But he would not fail in this. He would have his vengeance, and if he died achieving it, so much the better. There was nothing left for him in this world anyway. The opening day of the games dawned bright and hot. 50,000 Romans packed the Colosseum, their voices rising in a sustained roar that could be heard across the entire city. Vendors sold wine and roasted meat. Children darted between the seats. Senators sat in their reserved sections, discussing politics and placing bets. And in the imperial box, elevated above the mob, Commodus held court. The emperor had changed in the months since Germania. He wore his hair longer, in the fashion of young Alexander. Gold adorned his arms and throat. His robes were purple edged with gold thread, worth more than a farmer earned in a lifetime. He looked every inch the god-king he imagined himself to be. Beside him sat his sister Lucilla, beautiful, intelligent, trapped in a gilded cage of imperial protocol. She had been Marcus Aurelius's favorite child, the one who shares love of philosophy and learning. Now she was reduced to decoration in her brother's court, her opinions dismissed, her freedom curtailed. Sister, Commodus said without looking at her, "Are you not excited? These games will be remembered for generations. I have spared no expense." "I'm sure the gladiators appreciate your generosity," Lucilla replied dryly. "They should. I give them the opportunity to die gloriously, to be remembered. What more could a slave want?" He leaned forward as the morning's first fighters entered the arena. "Besides, the mob loves it, and a mob that's entertained is a mob that doesn't revolt." The early bouts were standard fare. Criminals executed in elaborate staged hunts, lesser gladiators dying in forgettable skirmishes. The crowd enjoyed it with a casual appreciation of people watching a familiar show. Then the afternoon arrived, and with it, the main events. "Now," Commodus announced to his court, "now we see something special. I'm told there is a Spaniard newly arrived who fights like no one since the days of Tigellinus. Let's see if the rumor matches reality." Maximus stood in the tunnel beneath the arena, listening to the roar of the crowd above. Around him, other gladiators prepared themselves, praying to their gods, checking their armor, saying farewell to friends. Hagen stood beside him, silent and solid as stone. "This is it," the Germanic warrior said. "After today, everything changes. You will be famous, Spaniard, and fame is a blade that cuts both ways." "Let it cut," Maximus replied, "as long as it brings me within reach of him." The gates opened. Light flooded the tunnel, along with the deafening sound of 50,000 voices. Maximus and 9 other gladiators walked onto the sand of the Colosseum, and the mob's roar intensified. This was Rome's heart. This was where the empire showed its true face. Beautiful and terrible, magnificent and monstrous. The sand was golden in the afternoon sun. The marble gleamed. The engineering was impeccable. And beneath it all, the blood of 1,000 men and animals soaked into the earth. "Gladiators!" the announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Today you fight for the glory of Rome, for the entertainment of the divine Emperor Commodus, and for your very lives. You will face the Tigress of Gaul and his champion team, men who have killed 50 opponents between them. Fight well, and you may live. Fight poorly, and you will feed the dogs. Roma Victrix. Roma Victrix." The gladiators repeated dutifully. "We who are about to die salute you." Then the gates on the opposite side opened, and the champions entered. They were massive men, these champions, chosen for their size and skill, armored heavily, armed with the best weapons gold could buy. The Tigress of Gaul himself was a legend, a gladiator who had purchased his freedom twice and returned to the arena twice. Unable to live without the roar of the crowd, the fight began. What happened next would be spoken of in Rome for years to come. Maximus didn't just fight, he commanded. He organized his fellow gladiators like a general deploying troops, turning a chaotic melee into a disciplined military action. He identified weaknesses in the champion's formation, exploited them ruthlessly, used terrain and timing and tactical genius honed over 20 years of warfare. The Tigress of Gaul fell first, his arrogance his undoing. He had charged directly at Maximus, expecting easy glory. Instead, he found himself outmaneuvered, trapped between two gladiators, and cut down while the crowd screamed in disbelief. One by one, the champions fell, and when the last of them lay bleeding in the sand, Maximus stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by his surviving teammates, and the Colosseum went silent with shock. Then the cheering began. It started as a ripple and became a tsunami. 50,000 Romans rose to their feet, stamping and shouting and screaming his name, or rather, the name they had given him. Spaniard, Spaniard, Spaniard. In the imperial box, Commodus leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the figure in the arena below. Something about the way the man moved, the way he held himself. "Who is he?" the emperor demanded. "I want to know who he is." An aide scrambled to check the records. "He's listed as a slave of Proximo, Caesar. No other name given. He's only fought in North Africa before this. Zuckerbar, mostly. Undefeated record. 15 wins. 16 now," Lucilla murmured, unable to hide her fascination. "Look how the people love him. They throw flowers." Indeed, the arena floor was being covered in flowers thrown from the stands. Women waved scarves. Men threw coins. The mob had found a new hero. Commodus's face darkened. "I want him brought to the palace. Tonight, I want to see the Spaniard for myself." But before that could happen, something occurred that no one expected. As Maximus turned to leave the arena, he looked up at the imperial box. For just a moment, his eyes met Commodus's across the distance. And in that moment, recognition flashed between them like lightning. The emperor's face went white. He stood abruptly, knocking over his wine. "No," he whispered. "It's not possible. He's dead. I killed him." "Brother?" Lucilla stood as well, alarmed by his reaction. "What's wrong?" But Commodus was already pushing through his courtiers, fleeing the box, his face a mask of terror and rage, because he had seen a ghost. The ghost of the man he had sent to die. The ghost of Maximus Decimus Meridius. In the tunnel beneath the Colosseum, Maximus was hustled back toward the ludus by guards who were suddenly wary, suddenly aware that something had changed. Proximo appeared, his face grave. "He recognized you," the old man said quietly. "Didn't he?" "Yes." "Then you're a dead man. He'll have you killed before sunrise." "No," Hagen interjected. "He can't. Not now. The mob loves the Spaniard. If he dies mysteriously, there will be questions. Riots, even. Commodus is vain, but he's not stupid. He knows the games are how he maintains power. So what does he do?" Tomas asked. Maximus smiled grimly. "He does what tyrants always do. He tries to kill me publicly. In the arena, he'll arrange a fight I can't win, against multiple opponents, against exotic animals, against impossible odds. And when I die, it will look like misfortune, not murder. Then we prepare," Hagen said firmly. "We train, we plan, and we help you survive long enough to reach him." That night, as predicted, armed soldiers arrived at the ludus. But they didn't come to execute Maximus. They came with a summons. "The emperor requests the presence of Spaniard at the palace," their captain announced. "Tonight, alone." It was a trap, obviously. Maximus would go to the palace and never return. But refusing wasn't an option. "I'll go," he said calmly. "Spaniard," Proximo began. "If he wanted me dead, he'd send assassins, not an invitation. He wants to understand how I survived. He wants to see if I'm truly a threat." Maximus stood, "And I want to look him in the eye one more time." The palace was exactly as he remembered it. Opulent, beautiful, excessive. Marble floors reflected torchlight. Gold leaf decorated every surface. Art stolen from conquered peoples lined the halls. It was Rome at its finest and worst, a monument to power built on the backs of millions. Commodus waited in his private chambers, surrounded by guards but trying to project confidence, when Maximus was brought before him. Still in his gladiator's rough tunic, still smelling of arena sand and blood, the emperor's mask of composure cracked. "Maximus," he breathed, "it really is you." "Caesar," Maximus replied, his voice empty of emotion. "You were dead. I had reports. You died en route to Rome, killed by bandits. I got better." Commodus laughed, a sound edge with hysteria. "Got better? Yes, you always were hard to kill." He circled Maximus, slowly, like he had in Germania. "My sister recognized you too, you know? She asked me why I looked so shaken. I told her I was ill, but she's clever, my sister. She'll figure it out." "Then kill me," Maximus said bluntly. "Poison me. Have your guards cut me down. Get it over with." "Oh, I want to," Commodus hissed. "You have no idea how much I want to. But you become inconvenient. The mob adores you. If you die mysteriously, questions will be asked. Riots might follow. And I can't afford riots right now. The Senate is already restless. So what do you want?" "I want to understand," Commodus said, and for a moment, genuine curiosity showed through his hatred. "How did you survive? How did you go from Rome's greatest general to a gladiator in a provincial school? What happened to you?" Maximus met his eyes. "You happened to me. You killed my emperor. You murdered my family. You took everything I loved and burned it to ash. That's what happened. Your family." Commodus's face showed something that might have been regret or might have been satisfaction. It was hard to tell. "Yes, that was necessary. You understand. Surely, I couldn't leave potential martyrs alive. The son of Maximus, growing up to avenge his father? That would have been a problem." The rage that filled Maximus then was almost overwhelming. His hands clenched, every muscle tensed. It would be so easy to attack, to try to kill Commodus here and now, even if it meant his own death. But the guards' hands were on their sword hilts. And dying now, die before Rome truly understood what Commodus was, that would make his family's deaths meaningless. "You're a coward," Maximus said instead. "You killed your father. You murder children. You hide behind guards and golden titles. But strip all that away and you're nothing. Just a weak, frightened man playing at being emperor." Commodus's face flushed crimson. "Get out," he screamed. "Get out before I forget the mob's love and have you torn apart. But hear this, Maximus. I will find a way to kill you. I will arrange a death so spectacular, so entertaining, that the people will beg for it. And when you die, I will make sure you know that I've won, that Rome is mine, that everything you fought for died with my father." Maximus was dragged from the chamber, but as he left, he heard Commodus say one more thing, quietly, almost to himself. "Why won't you just stay dead?" The games continued, and Maximus fought in bout after bout. Each time, the odds against him increased. Each time, the challenges became more impossible. Commodus was trying to kill him without making it obvious, arranging spectacles that should have resulted in his death, but somehow didn't. Maximus survived a battle against 6 gladiators, while armed only with a knife. He survived being chained to a post while arrows were fired at him, catching one arrow and using it to pick his lock, to the crowd's absolute delight. He survived a fight against a massive German who outweighed him by 100 pounds, using speed and tactics to overcome raw strength. And with each victory, the mob's love grew stronger. Spaniard became the most shouted word in Rome. Children played at being him. Women threw themselves at him. Men bet fortunes on his fights. He had become what no slave should ever become, more popular than the emperor himself. In the Ludus, Maximus's fellow gladiators treated him with a mixture of awe and caution. He was their champion, but champions attracted danger. Being near him meant being in the spotlight, and the spotlight in Rome could burn as easily as illuminate. Only Hagen, Tomas, and a few others remained truly loyal. They trained together, ate together, prepared for the inevitable day when Commodus would escalate his attempts at murder beyond what skill alone could overcome. He'll use animals next, Hagen predicted one night. Tigers, lions, bears. Things that don't care about your tactics or your fame. I've fought animals before, Maximus said. Not like these. Not in the Colosseum, where everything is designed for maximum spectacle. He'll starve them, enrage them, release them all at once if he has to. Maximus nodded. He knew Hagen was right. But what choice did he have? Run? Escape? Even if he could, it would accomplish nothing. He needed to be here, in the heart of Rome, visible and celebrated, until the moment came. And that moment was coming. He could feel it. The moment arrived in the form of Senator Gracchus. The old senator appeared at the Ludus one evening, accompanied only by a single slave. He was a remnant of Marcus Aurelius's time, one of the few senators who still believed Rome should be a republic, not a monarchy. He was also one of the few brave enough to oppose Commodus publicly. I wish to speak with the Spaniard, he told Proximo. I don't think, the old gladiator began. I am here as a friend, Gracchus interrupted, and I believe we have interests in common. They met in a private room, away from guards and listeners. Gracchus studied Maximus for a long moment before speaking. General Maximus Decimus Meridius, he said softly, commander of the armies of the north, the greatest general Rome has ever known. I saw you once years ago, when you returned from the campaign in Parthia. You rode through the streets in triumph, and you looked uncomfortable with the glory. That's when I knew Marcus Aurelius had chosen well in trusting you. That man is dead, Maximus said. Is he? I wonder. Gracchus sat down, moving like a man whose bones ache with age and disappointment. I know what Commodus did. I know he murdered his father. I know he tried to murder you. I know about your family. I'm sorry, truly sorry. And I know that he's destroying Rome day by day, turning us into a dictatorship built on blood, sport, and fear. Why are you telling me this? Because the mob loves you more than they love their emperor. Because you have something Commodus can never have, genuine honor. Because, Gracchus leaned forward, because Rome needs you. Rome threw me away. Rome didn't know. The people think you're just a gladiator, a lucky slave. But if they knew who you really were, if they knew that their emperor murdered his father and their greatest general, the Senate could act. We could oppose Commodus. We could restore the republic Marcus Aurelius dreamed of. Maximus laughed bitterly. You want to use me. Use my story, my pain, my family's death. Use it all for political advantage. I want to save Rome, Gracchus said firmly. Yes, I'm using you. But you're using Rome too, aren't you? Using the games to get close to Commodus. Using the mob's love as a shield. We're both trying to achieve the same thing, his downfall. I don't care about Rome's government. I care about revenge. Then help me and you'll get it. I have allies in the Senate. Lucilla, the emperor's sister, sympathizes with our cause. Even some of the Praetorian Guard are questioning Commodus's fitness to rule. If we coordinate, if we move together, we can remove him from power. And you, General, you can have your vengeance with Rome's blessing instead of dying in the arena like a common criminal. Maximus was silent for a long time. What Gracchus offered was tempting. A chance to destroy Commodus and possibly survive. A chance to give his death meaning beyond simple revenge. But could he trust a senator? Could he trust Rome? The Empire had taken everything from him. Why should he help preserve it? I'll think about it, he said finally. Think quickly, Gracchus urged. Commodus grows more unstable every day. He's planning something for the final day of the games. Something he calls the ultimate spectacle. I don't know what it is, but I know it involves you. If you want to survive it, you'll need allies. After Gracchus left, Maximus sat in darkness, thinking. Hagen found him there hours later. You're troubled, the Germanic warrior observed. A senator wants to start a rebellion. He wants to use me as a symbol. Will you do it? I don't know. I came here to kill Commodus, not to save Rome. Hagen sat beside him. I will tell you something, Spaniard. Something I learned in my years of war against Rome. The Empire is like a great tree. rotten at the core but still standing because no one has the courage to push it over. But when it falls, and it will fall someday, many innocent people will be crushed beneath it. Your family was crushed. My family was crushed. How many more families must be crushed before someone says enough? You think I should help him? I think you should decide whether you want to die for revenge or live for something more. Revenge is simple. Revenge is clean. But it's also empty. When you kill Commodus, and you will kill him, I believe this. What then? Will your family's deaths be revenged? Or will they be given meaning? Maximus had no answer. The final day of the games arrived. 100 days of spectacle, and now the grand finale. The Colosseum was packed beyond capacity. People standing in the aisles, sitting on the upper rim, desperate to witness whatever Commodus had planned. The emperor sat in his box, dressed as Hercules, lion skin draped over his shoulders, club in hand. He had announced that he himself would fight in the arena today, would demonstrate his divine prowess. The crowd was uncertain how to react. It was one thing for an emperor to attend the games. It was another for him to participate, like a common entertainer. But Commodus had gone mad with power and paranoia. He needed to prove himself greater than Maximus, needed to show Rome who their true hero was. The morning spectacles were elaborate. Reenactments of famous battles, hunts with exotic animals, executions dressed up as theater. Then, as the afternoon sun beat down, the announcer's voice rang out. Citizens of Rome, your divine emperor, Commodus Hercules, blessed of the gods, will now grace you with a demonstration of martial prowess. But first, a preliminary bout. The Spaniard, champion of the arena, will face a challenge unlike any before. Maximus was led onto the sand, but something was wrong. His hands were chained. His armor was minimal. And waiting for him in the center of the arena was not another gladiator, but Commodus himself, fully armored, with the best weapons Rome could provide. The crowd gasped. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution. People of Rome. Commodus's voice boomed across the Colosseum. This slave has been beloved by you, but he is also a traitor to Rome. He plotted against my divine father, Marcus Aurelius. He is the very Maximus who was condemned for treason. The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd. The Spaniard was Maximus, their greatest general, but he was supposed to be dead, supposed to have been executed for crimes against the state. He lives. Commodus continued. He lives because he escaped justice and hid in the provinces like a coward. But today, divine justice will be served. Today, your emperor will personally execute this traitor, and all Rome will see that no one, not even the great Maximus, can stand against imperial power. In the stands, Senator Gracchus stood, his face pale. In the imperial box, Lucilla covered her mouth with her hand, understanding finally who the Spaniard truly was, understanding the full depths of her brother's crimes. And on the sand, Maximus faced his enemy at last. Before we begin, Commodus said, loud enough for the front rows to hear but not the entire crowd, I want you to know I had them bring your family's bodies to Rome. They're buried in a mass grave with criminals and dogs. Your wife, your son, forgotten, unmourned. That is your legacy, Maximus. Failure and death. The words were meant to break him, to make him rage, to make him sloppy. Instead, Maximus smiled. It was terrible, that smile. It was a smile of a man who has nothing left to lose and everything left to take. My family waits for me, he said calmly. In the afterlife, in the peace you can never know. And soon, very soon, I will join them. But you, Commodus, you will live. You will live knowing that a slave beat you, that the mob loves a gladiator more than their emperor, that history will remember you as the man who murdered his father and lost to a better man. Fight! Commodus screamed, and he attacked. Part 8. The final battle. The fight that followed was not like any that had come before. Commodus fought with desperation and hate, putting all his skill and fury into every strike. He was not a bad fighter. He had trained since childhood, had killed in the arena before. But Maximus was something else entirely. Even chained, even injured from a knife wound Commodus had secretly inflicted before the fight, Maximus was superior. He turned the chains into a weapon, using them to entangle Commodus's sword. He moved like water, like shadow, avoiding strikes that should have killed him. He made the Emperor look clumsy, made him look weak. The crowd watched in stunned silence, then began to cheer, not for their emperor, for Maximus. Maximus, Maximus, Maximus. Commodus heard his name echoing from 50,000 throats, and something inside him snapped. He abandoned technique, abandoned dignity, and simply tried to kill Maximus through sheer ferocity. But fury is not skill. Rage is not strength. Maximus caught the Emperor. Maximus caught the Emperor's sword arm mid-swing. For a moment, they stood frozen. Emperor and slave, murderer and avenger, locked together in an embrace that could only end in death. Do you remember? Maximus whispered, his voice raw with pain and fury. Do you remember my son's face when your men nailed him to that cross? Do you remember my wife's screams? Commodus's eyes widened with terror. He tried to pull away, but Maximus held him fast. I remember, Maximus continued, his voice breaking. Every day, every night, their faces haunt me. And now, Commodus, now they will have justice. With a savage twist, Maximus wrenched the sword from the Emperor's grip. Commodus stumbled backward, falling to his knees in the sand. And for the first time in his pampered life, he understood what it meant to be powerless. Guards, he screamed. Kill him. Kill this slave. But the Praetorian guards stood frozen. They looked at the crowd, at the 50,000 Romans on their feet, chanting Maximus's name. They looked at each other, at their emperor groveling in the dirt, at the gladiator standing over him like an avenging god. And they did nothing. Maximus, please. Commodus begged, all pretense of divinity stripped away. Please, I'll give you anything. Your freedom, gold, land, a position in the Senate. Just let me live. You gave me a gift once, Maximus said quietly, raising the sword. You showed me what I truly am. Not a general, not a husband or father, not even a man anymore. You made me a weapon, and weapons have only one purpose. Maximus, no. The sword fell. It was not a clean death. Maximus made sure of that. He drove the blade into Commodus's stomach, just as the Emperor's men had driven spears into his family. He watched as the Emperor's eyes went wide with shock and pain, as understanding finally dawned that he was mortal after all, that divine right meant nothing to cold steel. Commodus fell forward, blood pooling beneath him, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. He reached out with one trembling hand toward his sister's box, toward Lucilla, perhaps seeking forgiveness or simply wondering why no one came to save him. Then he died. The Emperor of Rome, master of the known world, died in the sand like a common criminal while the mob cheered. Maximus stood over the body, swaying. The knife wound Commodus had inflicted before the fight was deeper than he'd let himself acknowledge. Blood ran down his side, soaking into the sand. His vision blurred. The Colosseum had gone silent again, as if the entire city held its breath. Then someone started clapping. It was Senator Gracchus, standing in the Senate section, his old hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause. Others joined him. First a few senators, then more, then the entire section. The sound spread like wildfire through the arena. Within seconds, 50,000 people were applauding, stamping their feet, weeping with joy and relief. Their emperor was dead. Their hero had triumphed. And Rome was free. Maximus, Maximus, Maximus. But Maximus didn't hear them anymore. He was sinking to his knees, the sword falling from his nerveless fingers. The wound was mortal. He'd known at the moment the blade entered his side, had felt death's cold touch even as he'd fought. He'd had just enough strength for one last battle, one last kill. It was enough. Hagen was suddenly there, having broken through the arena gates with Tomas and the other gladiators from the Ludus. The giant Germanic warrior caught Maximus as he fell, lowering him gently to sand. Spaniard, Hagen said, his voice thick with emotion. Brother, stay with us. Cat, Maximus whispered. It's done. He's dead. They're avenged. You're dying for nothing, Hagen said fiercely. You won. You defeated him. Now live, claim your freedom, claim your place in Rome. But Maximus shook his head weakly. No place for me here. Never was. I'm going home. Lucilla appeared, having run from the imperial box. Her face streaked with tears. She knelt beside Maximus, taking his hand in hers. "General," she said softly. "Maximus, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what my brother had done. If I had known. Not your fault," Maximus managed. "You're like your father. Good. Rome needs people like you. What can I do?" Lucilla asked desperately. "There must be something. Physicians the best in Rome." "Too late for that. But there is something." He squeezed her hand with what little strength remained. "My family. They're buried. Somewhere. Find them. Give them proper funeral. Let them rest with honor." "I swear it," Lucilla said, tears falling freely now. "I swear on my father's memory. They will be honored as heroes of Rome. Your son, your wife, they will be remembered." Maximus smiled, and it was the first genuine smile that had touched his face since Germania. "Thank you." Senator Gracchus approached, his old face grave. He looked down at the dying general, at the man who had just changed the course of history with a single act of vengeance. "The Senate will meet tonight," he said formally. "We will declare Commodus's reign illegitimate. We will restore the Republic, as Marcus Aurelius wished. Your death will not be in vain, General." "Don't care about that," Maximus said. "Just wanted him to pay, wanted them to rest." He closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his lids, he saw them. Selene, standing in their garden, the sun in her hair, smiling the way she used to when he returned from campaign. Young Marcus, running toward her with arms outstretched, laughing, alive, whole. "Husband," Selene said, her voice like music, "you're finally home." "Father," Marcus cried, "did you win? Did you beat the bad men?" "Yes," Maximus whispered, though the people around him couldn't hear. "Yes, my son, I won. I beat them all." The vision grew brighter, warmer. The arena, the pain, the blood, all of it faded away like morning mist. There was only light now, and his family waiting in it, and the promise of peace after so much war. "I'm coming," he said. "Wait for me. I'm coming home." His hand fell from Lucilla's grasp. His chest rose once more, then stilled. Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the north, general of the Felix legions, loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, husband to Selene, father to Marcus, was dead. But in death, he had achieved what he could never have achieved in life. He had killed a tyrant. He had avenged his family. And he had given Rome a chance, however small, to remember what it once was. The crowd fell silent, understanding finally what they had witnessed. This had not been a spectacle. This had been a sacrifice. Hagen stood, lifting Maximus's body in his arms. Tomas and the other gladiators formed an honor guard around him, and slowly, reverently, they carried him from the arena while 50,000 Romans stood in respectful silence. As they walked, people began to throw flowers again, not in celebration now, but in mourning. Rose petals fell like red rain, covering the path, covering the body of the man who had been their champion. An imperial box, now empty except for Lucilla and Gracchus. They watched the procession. "What will you do now?" Lucilla asked quietly. "Rebuild," Gracchus said, "if we can, if the people and the Senate will allow it. We have a chance, at least, a chance to be better than we were." "My brother was a monster," Lucilla said, her voice hollow. "But he was also my brother. I should have seen what he was becoming. I should have stopped him." "We all should have," Gracchus replied. "That's the burden we must carry. But we honor the dead, both Maximus and your father, by ensuring their sacrifices meant something. Rome must change. We must change." Below them, Maximus's body disappeared into the tunnels beneath the Colosseum, carried toward whatever fate the gladiators and Proximo had planned for their fallen champion. 3 days later, as the sun rose over the hills of Spain, a funeral pyre burned in the ruins of a villa that had once been beautiful. Lucilla had kept her promise. She had found the bodies of Selene and young Marcus, had ordered them exhumed from their degrading resting place. She had sent them, along with Maximus, back to the land they had loved, and she had sent soldiers to ensure they received the funeral they deserved. Proximo was there, having accompanied his champion's body on its final journey. Hagen stood beside him, along with Tomas and a dozen other gladiators who had won their freedom in the chaos following Commodus's death. They had chosen to use that freedom to honor the man who had shown them what true courage looked like. The pyre burned hot and bright, consuming the 3 bodies wrapped in fine linen and surrounded by flowers. As the flames rose toward the morning sky, Proximo spoke, his old voice carrying across the ruined garden. In life, he was a general, a husband, a father. In death, he was a gladiator, a champion, an avenger. But in all things, he was a man of honor. Rome will remember him. History will remember him. And we who fought beside him, who saw what he truly was, we will never forget. Never forget, the gladiators echoed. As the fire burned, Lucilla arrived with a small contingent of guards. She carried something wrapped in silk, the wooden sword, the rudis, that symbolized freedom for gladiators. It should have been given to Maximus in life, but he had died before the formality could be observed. He earned this 1,000 times over, she said, laying it on the pyre. Let it burn with him. Let him carry his freedom into whatever comes next. The wood caught fire, and for a moment, it seemed to burn brighter than the rest of the pyre, as if Maximus' spirit itself was finally, truly free. They stood there until the fire died to embers, until nothing remained but ash and memory. Then, one by one, they departed. The gladiators returned to Rome, to lives they would build with their newfound freedom. Lucilla returned to help Gracchus and the Senate navigate the treacherous waters of Rome's transformation from dictatorship back toward republic. Only Proximo remained, standing in the garden as evening fell. I was a slave once, he said to the ashes. Then I was free. Then I owned slaves. And now I think I understand that freedom is not something you're given. It's something you take. You took yours, Spaniard. You took it with blood and pain and sacrifice. And in doing so, you freed more than just yourself. He bent slowly, his old bones protesting, and scooped up a handful of ash. He let it run through his fingers, watching it scatter in the wind. Rest now, General. Your war is over. The years that followed were turbulent for Rome. The Senate did attempt to restore the Republic, though corruption and ambition made the process messy and incomplete. Lucilla fought tirelessly for reform, becoming one of the most powerful voices in Roman politics. Senator Gracchus lived just long enough to see some of his dreams realized before dying peacefully in his sleep. Hagen returned to the frontier, using his freedom to search for his family. He found them, alive, enslaved, but alive, and used every coin he'd earned in the arena to purchase their freedom. He never returned to the Empire's heart, choosing instead to live out his days in the forests of his homeland, free at last. Tomas became a teacher, training young men not in the arts of war, but in philosophy and rhetoric. He often told his students about the Spaniard, about the man who had shown him that strength without honor was meaningless, that vengeance could be just, but that mercy was always harder than killing. And Maximus? Maximus became legend. His story was told in taverns and forums, in Senate chambers and gladiatorial schools. It was embellished, exaggerated, transformed by time and telling into something larger than life. Some said he'd been 8 feet tall, that he killed 100 men in single combat, that the gods themselves had guided his hand. But those who had known him, truly known him, they told a different story. They spoke of a man who had loved deeply and lost everything, who had been broken by grief and reforged in blood, who had faced an empire and refused to bend, who had chosen vengeance not because it was noble, but because it was all he had left to give. They spoke of a man who had died not as a general or a gladiator, but as a father finally going home to his family. In the villa in Spain, grass grew over the ruins. Wildflowers bloomed where the garden had been. The olive trees, scarred by fire, survived and eventually bore fruit again. Life continued, as it always does, building over the graves of the past. But on quiet evenings, when the wind moved through the trees just right, locals swore they could hear voices. A woman's laughter, a child asking questions, a man's deep voice responding with patience and love. Some said it was ghosts, others said it was memory. But perhaps there was no difference. Perhaps the dead lived on in the stories we told, in the lives they had touched, in the changes they had wrought. Perhaps Maximus had found his peace at last, not in Rome's glory, not in the Senate's gratitude, not in the mob's adoration, but in the simple truth that he had kept his promise. He had avenged his family. He had made their murderer answer for his crimes. And he had died knowing they waited for him. In the end, that was enough. In the end, that was everything. Many years later, a young boy visited the ruins with his grandfather. They stood where the villa had once been, and the old man, who had been a gladiator once, who had fought beside the Spaniard, told the story one more time. Was he a hero? The boy asked when the tale was done. The old man thought for a long moment before answering. He was a man, he said finally, just a man, who loved his family more than life itself, who faced the worst that could happen and refused to be broken by it, who turned his grief into a blade and his rage into justice. Was he a hero? I don't know, but he was good, and he was true, and he was brave, and in this world, perhaps that's enough. The boy nodded, trying to understand. Then he asked one more question. Do you think he's happy now? Wherever he is. The old man smiled, and in his smile was a memory of a garden in Spain, of a warrior finally laying down his sword, of a father reunited with a son. Yes, he said. Yes, I think he's home. And in the whisper wind through ancient olive trees, in the scatter of wildflowers across forgotten graves, in the memory of a man who had been more than he seemed and less than legend, but exactly what Rome needed. In all of that there was peace. At last,